Well, welcome to this module where we're going to be taking a look at how we develop a business case. And we're going to start by trying to understand why a business case is so important. There are three principal reasons for needing a business case in a project. The first, I suppose, is the most obvious of them all. We need to describe the value of the project. So when we look at the project on its own merits, we can see that on the one hand we've got the costs, on the other hand we've got the benefits, and one outweighs the other. And of course we hope that it swings in favour of the benefits. That would justify the project on a standalone basis. However, in any business or in any organisation, a business case can be used additionally for another reason. And that's when we have to start making some decisions about which projects we're going to choose. Any senior management team will have before it a whole range of projects that they could pick on, and in most cases they've only got the opportunity to pick maybe 20–30% of those potential projects that they would like to invest in. So at some point or another they have to make a decision about which projects to discard and which projects to sponsor. The business case can help them to do that. By showing the comparative merits of one project versus another, they can make those decisions. And the third reason for having a business case, most organisations have some sort of process by which they need to identify what funds are going to be necessary and then apportion them to the correct projects. So the business case can facilitate the smooth running of the approval process. So let's take a look inside the business case. What are the contents that you'd expect in a typical document of this nature? Well, to begin with, we'd expect a pretty thorough listing of the opportunity or the problem, by which we mean what's the challenge that we face. It could be one which we could look at very positively. There could be an opportunity to gain some new revenues, or there could be a problem that needs to be fixed, some challenge that we faced in the course of running the business that needs now to be overcome. The opportunity or problem need to be put in the context of the strategy. So if the organisation is moving forward perhaps into a new market, this project might be able to move us forward in that respect. And so the business case has to be able to describe how this project fits into the general context of the business operation and its move forward. Now, in doing so, it'll probably be likely that we identify some interdependencies. That's to say, connections between this proposed project and other potential or actual projects which are already underway. Those two need to be listed. So we then come to success criteria. What does good look like? So what are the ways in which we would measure this project? We're going to focus very much on the commercial measures of success, and this module and subsequent modules will look in far greater detail at that. But there are other ways of describing success too. So for instance, from a user's point of view, I suppose success for them in the case perhaps of a new computer system might be fairly straightforward. We might imagine that what they're looking for is all the functionality they ask for being present and working effectively. But if we put our feet into the shoes of a user, we may be able to identify other measures of success. So for instance, what they may wish for in addition to that functionality is that every user has been trained and trained to a particular standard. Suddenly that becomes a measure which from their perspective is very important and very relevant. It's not commercial, but it matters to them. And it follows that the specialists will have their own measures of success too. An example here might be that perhaps all legal remedies have been followed. We've stuck within the law in order to pursue this project. Or that all the policies that we expect to be followed have been adhered to. So then we come to really the heart of the business case, which is where we begin to look at the focus for that particular option that we've chosen. But in focusing on one particular option, it could be that we've rejected some others. Now, in later modules, we'll take a look at the do-nothing option, which is a very viable and reasonable one. It could, however, have been one of the options that we've thrown out, and there may have been plenty of others. We ought to list them here so that when a judgment's being made about which of the options we choose and whether it's the right one, we can see those that have been discarded and see the relative costs and merits of each. It could be that we come back and reconsider some of those discarded options later on. However, assuming we've selected one particular option to pursue, we then go into some detail. We drill down and try and describe the features of that particular option. And we're doing so here particularly from a commercial point of view. We're trying to describe for the investors of the project what the costs and the benefits are likely to be and what those two look like together when they are brought to compare one against the other. Now, we'd be failing in our duties as project managers and sponsors if we weren't to consider the risks. So first, within the selected option, we might consider what the risks are going to be, and we can list those. And later modules will look at how we can drill down and identify what risks there may be to a project. Then we need to identify what the benefits are going to be, and we can list those out. We ought to be commercially measuring them. We should be describing what the value of those benefits are going to be, and in later modules we'll cover that very specifically. So too the costs. We ought to list out what we think the relevant costs are going to be, and relatively speaking they are easier to identify than perhaps the benefits. And we then have to bring them together in a cost-benefit analysis where we compare one with the other and hope that the benefits outweigh the costs. It then follows that having built that expression of a business case, we can add to it some further detail. So we'll have maybe some deliverables and timescales, very high level at this point because we are only anticipating a project. We haven't planned it yet. We may have had to make some very high level assumptions about how we've come up with the various figures. And importantly, specifically within the business case, we ought to be describing what our benefits realisation plan is going to be. That's to say, how we go about ensuring that those benefits we're anticipating are actually delivered. So this may have to do with the period after the project when we're looking to measure benefits that may at that point still be maturing, still being realised. Now, I'd just like you to spend 5 or 6 minutes listening to an article which was broadcast by the BBC, where they considered the difficulty of trying to express benefits in a commercial way. Listen to this, absorb as much as you can of it, and then move on to further modules where eventually we will lead to an exercise that will help you to understand how to compare the benefits and the costs and hopefully come up with an expression that enables us to describe whether we think this is a viable project.
Shotover Park provides lots of benefits for local people.
Professor Rosie Hales from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology assesses the scene from the top of Shotover Country Park on the outskirts of Oxford.
There are the obvious benefits. People from nearby can come here to walk, exercise their dogs, and that of course contributes to their physical health and well-being. But there are other benefits that are derived from this piece of land that are probably a little bit more unseen and hidden. For example, grassland purifies water that runs off agricultural land, and all the bacteria and fungi in the soil are recycling nutrients. So there are other benefits there that are hidden and less apparent.
It's these other hidden benefits that scientists contributing to the UK's first national ecosystem assessment are trying to quantify. Benefits like pollination services to agriculture or the flood prevention and alleviation provided by woods and marshland upstream of towns and cities. In the past, these less tangible benefits associated with wildlife and the environment have struggled to get a look in when hard-nosed financial decisions about policy and land use are being made.
We looked at 8 broad habitats.
But that could be about to change.
All the way from mountains to marine systems.
The National Ecosystem Assessment Report, compiled by hundreds of UK scientists and launched today, was presented by DEFRA's chief scientist, Dr. Bob Watson.
How has it affected the services the habitats provide, and why did things change? What we haven't recognised in our decision making and our policy making is the value of these forests, the value of our agricultural lands, our mountain moors and heaths, to things such as climate control, pollination control, pollution control, and it's that hidden value that we just take for granted. What we're saying now is we should more explicitly take this so-called hidden value into account when we decide how to manage our land or when we change certain policies.
So how do you ascribe a monetary value to something as amorphous as, say, the decline of the honeybee? Ian Bateman is the Professor of Environmental Science and Economics at the University of East Anglia and a co-author of the report.
What we're trying to do, the fundamental objective of this whole analysis, is to say decision making is made by people who quite understandably want to understand things in a common unit. That common unit that they're most familiar with is money. So we're trying to put money values onto the services and benefits that you get from the natural environment.
The obvious problem with the ecosystem assessment is that it offers no mechanism for imposing the costs associated with environmental degradation on the individual farmer or developer who wants to plough up a woodland or build on a floodplain. And viewed from up here on Shotover Hill, there's a danger that in trying to set a price for anything, we lose sight of the value of everything. There's still no way to assess the spiritual value of this fantastic view across Oxford's dreaming spires.